My name is John Gray, show producer here at the Hammer Factor, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1. This is our 40th episode of the Hammer Factor. I'd like to introduce our co-host of this Whitewater show, co-founder of Immersion Research, Whitewater legend, and SUP enthusiast, John Weld. As well, I would like to introduce Policy Director for the Outdoor Alliance, North Fork champion, and president of the Ryan Zeke fan club, Lewis Geltman. We're back, 2018, fellas.
Right.
Howdy.
We're back.
I think this is the second time that we've announced the commencement of Season 2.
Yes.
I think we started Season 2 in September or something, but that's all right. Let's not get caught up in that sort of details.
Yeah, I remember that, but, this is kind of second year. We kind of had that one overlap year there.
I feel like the last episode of 2017 was so poor. Was such a poor effort that it was a catalyst of sorts.
Yeah, I think you may be right. I mean,
I was impressed we got emails from people being like, you guys should keep going after that. And that the response wasn't like, I think you guys have had a good run.
We did get one that I think called it as it was, and we'll get to that in a minute.
I wasn't sure when we brought Max Blackburn on if it saved the show or it just totally put it in a different category. That one was crazy. If you haven't listened to that one, don't go back and listen to it.
Right.
All right. Should we move into a little Lewis Geltman Make Our Day programming? Lewis, do you have something prepared to share with us today?
No, I don't have anything. You guys gave me 5 minutes notice that we were doing this podcast.
Wah.
And
how do you think our guests feel?
What do you want to talk about? You want to talk about the monument stuff? There's a bill that got a hearing on Tuesday.
No, I want to talk about the drilling and the opening up the 100 million acres of coastline to oil and gas development.
Except Florida.
Right. Because you can see oil rigs from Mar-a-Lago if they put them out there, I suppose.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of outside of my expertise. I mean, I don't know any more about this than you guys do. You know, we don't really work on ocean issues just because of I don't know, it's like not a geography that aligns with our member organization so much. I mean, not to say we wouldn't, but it's not something that's been a big focus of ours. But I've been talking more with those guys at Surfrider, who I think are super, super savvy and, see the world in the same way kind of as we do. Yes, no Surfrider?
Mm-hmm.
I know it by name.
Yeah, I mean, they're like AW for surfers, basically, and I think we're pretty interested in doing some more work with those guys just because, I don't know, I think we see this at World in the same way, and there's probably some room to, kind of build a movement around protecting public lands and waters in a way.
Let's face it, they're probably a lot cooler than we are.
I don't know, man. We're pretty cool. Don't sell yourself short there, Weld.
Hey, well, I think in a conversation that you and I had, John, recently about the Hammer Factor and kind of the underlying premise for the show, it's that,
yes,
you know what? Whitewater's badass. There's no reason to compare it to anything else or be like anything,
Well, here's how it started. This is an interesting conversation. I'm glad you brought this up because Grace and I have these impromptu Hammer Factor shows 3 or 4 times a week. And we were discussing, it got started because we're talking about Evan Garcia. He's about to have these boats come in, these Waka boats, and he's making a go of it in Whitewater. And then, a couple episodes ago, we had that guy making Whitewater. He's making Whitewater boats. And I had this epiphany that, as an industry, Whitewater as an industry, we're kind of led, the people who are leading this business are larger companies who really don't care that much about Whitewater. I mean, you look at Jackson, you look at Confluence, you look at Johnson, and who is it now? Big Adventure that runs Legacy. Whitewater just isn't something they take that seriously. But at the same time, they're the ones that are really They don't. I mean, from a financial standpoint, it's nothing but a
Yeah,
headache
you
to
can't
them.
say that. You can't say that Jackson Kayaks doesn't take Whitewater seriously.
I can, though.
I don't know, man.
I mean, I think that people are very serious about it, but in terms of crafting our brand, I mean, I mean, they're the ones that are like, we need to, their marketing's being spent on kayak fishing or SUP or recreational kayaking. But my point is that we need more core whitewater companies to help craft our brand. You know what I mean? I don't want our industry to be led entirely by people whose interest in whitewater is marginal. Anytime I see someone like Evan or someone like this guy making whitewater kayaks, I'm like, yeah, we need more of this. And then where that went to from there, whether you agree with this or not, is that John and I start talking about what is the brand of whitewater. And Hammer Factor is a way, sort of a celebration of what whitewater is. And it's not, I mean, I think at least John and I feel that whitewater isn't, to us, it's not like a huge drive to get everybody in the country involved. I mean, whitewater is a pretty down and dirty, grimy sport. At some point in whitewater, you have to love rooting around in the rhododendrons in the sleet, kind of scared, cold, hungry, not sure what's going to happen next. Not many people want to do that, but at the same time, that's an awesome thing. I mean, I think it certainly creates a brotherhood and sisterhood of participants that's pretty cool, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, I remember something Jason Beeks told me one time that really stuck with me is that, and I can't give it to you verbatim, but the point was that he saw the relative unpopularity of whitewater as like a badge of honor and not a problem with the sport. It's like,
Yeah.
That's exactly what our conversation.
That
That's exactly what our conversation came back to. It's like, this is not a lifestyle per se. Anyone can do it. It's for everybody. Everyone should give it a go. That's not what whitewater is. Whitewater is for a select few people who want an experience that is so out of the ordinary that they can't even explain it to people. You can't even go to work and explain, dude, I was on the Little White at 4.5 feet. You wouldn't believe what, no one's going to get that or understand that. So you got to have kind of that, I don't know, you got to be an outlier, and that's what I like. That's why I like meeting all the people and talking about it, personally.
My informal motto for whitewater has been, our best vacation is your worst nightmare.
Yeah. That's a pretty good one.
you can buy bumper stickers that say that from a climbing company.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I must have seen it then somewhere. I've been saying that sort of offhandedly for years, but oh well.
Moving forward, show sponsors. Here's on my list of things. Kaleva, man, this feels really good, guys. You should feel good about this. We've got some interest in Outdoor Alliance and whatever, but we did our first ads, and Kaleva got a really good response from our ads. All kinds of inquiries about the trips and whatnot that we're doing. So
You should too. It's like I said, it's an amazing opportunity to live like a pro kayaker for a couple of weeks in Mexico.
yeah, exactly. and
I have some hot news off that Kaleva trip. Actually, I was talking with Alex Markoff this morning, and he let me know that Tom McEwen had to fly home early. I guess he hit his head somewhere in the Alsaseka. He's fine, it sounds like, but he cracked his helmet on it. But this is a guy who's in his 70s running,
Damn.
class 5, stout class 5.
God, dude, we got to get him on the show. I don't think I've ever had a word with Tom.
We probably should have Tom McEwen on the show.
Yeah.
I think Gelman and I are both unsure how that would really play out.
Well, explain
I
that
think
to
on
me.
balance it'd be good.
Yeah, I think it would be good. We would just have to give it some. I mean, Tom is just such a wealth of knowledge that I think we would have to think about what we want to talk about with Tom and not just have a meandering conversation. But I think if we could pick some things out for him, and he's
very modest too. I mean, in a weird way, we're gonna have to pry stuff out of him. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I don't know. That intrigues me even more to have him on the show.
Yeah, I mean, the best analogy I could make would be it'd be like having Reinhold Messner or one of the guys who started the founders of modern surfing or something like that on the show. I mean, he's that important, I think, to the sport.
Killer.
Anyway,
Back to what I was saying. We're if you want to advertise on the Hammer Factor, now's the time to get it done, because there's only so much inventory, and
we're filling up.
I mean, there's only so many shows that are going to come out, so now's the time.
It's going to be. You should think it over carefully, because it's going to be like one of those Groupon scenarios where all of a sudden you're flooded with like 100,000 orders that you're unprepared to fill.
Right.
Think it over carefully.
Yeah.
No, we do have.
Make sure you have the infrastructure. You have the backbone already in place for the volume.
We do have some cool sponsorships coming in this year, so
you're going to want some tax. You're going to do some tax planning, that kind of thing.
Oh, should we move on to some viewer mail before we fall off the rails again? What do you guys think?
Let's get the hate mail right off the bat, because we got some good hate mail this week.
All right, I'm gonna go with the first one here. This comes from Brian Richard. So we love our listener mail. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I love hearing these comments and whatnot, and a lot of times they take me, a little bit off guard. But here we go. Brian Richard, love the show.
Do you guys ever listen to Tony Kornheiser?
Why?
Does he work for Dagger?
Well, that's what I'm talking about, but won't dignify it with a response.
Didn't he? Does he paddle an RPM? I've seen that guy. He has like that Grateful Heads helmet on the upper yacht and an RPM. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I want like an intro song for listener mail, like Kornheiser has,
Okay. I'm putting that on the list right now.
Like the Tony
That's the
mail.
B guy. Kornheiser's the beat man on the upper yacht. He has the B helmet, the B boat. Not to be confused with the shark guy on the upper yacht.
I wonder if we could get
the shark boat.
Yeah, we need to get Rush on this. We need to have some sort of like Hammer Factor mailbag freestyle to intro this segment with.
All right, I'm on it, Lewis. Your wish is my command, especially if you get me that meeting in DC.
Yeah.
Hammer Factor mailbag. I love it. So Brian Richards says, love the show. Period. New line. I love the way he wrote this.
Full stop.
Full stop.
Right.
Hit return. Let's get to the point. Will Weld please stop cutting speakers off?
Can I stop you for a second? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to do that. Finish.
Will Weld please stop cutting speakers off and talking over them? Weld is a valuable part of the show, yes, but would love to hear others' comments. Perhaps he would listen to the shows to hear what I'm speaking of. I'm just going to pass that one right over to you, Mr. Weld.
Can I respond?
Yes.
First of all,
hold up. No, wait, go ahead.
I'm not going to listen to the old shows. That's final. I have no interest in hearing any more of myself or you two, other than here. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is he's absolutely right, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I run my own business, right? Which means probably I'm unemployable due to my stubborn, bullheaded attitude anyway. And that's very true about me. I am completely unemployable because I cannot listen to anybody for any reason about anything, especially someone telling me what to do and when to do it. That's A. B, when you've been self-employed for as long as I have, and I've never had a job. I've made it this far, and I don't intend to change. You basically get paid. People get paid to listen to you bloviate, and you get used to that arrangement. And that's what I do. I bloviate. I come into the office and I spout, and people sit there and they roll their eyes, but they know not to cut me off because it'll go quicker if they don't say anything. And that's what people who are self-employed do. And so Brian's correct. He's absolutely right. And I want to apologize to Brian and everyone else, and to you two.
Well, I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we're talking through a Skype connection. A lot of times it's hard, the digital there's digital delay in there and whatnot. But you know what? You talk over me all the time, so I'm fine with that. I guess I'm just used to it. I guess Lewis and I are just used to it. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the Skype thing, John. It's just I know more than you.
Understood. We'll leave it at that.
I don't know. I feel like if you listen to any sports talk radio show or like any of those obnoxious political banter shows on television, you're gonna get the same damn thing. It's just inherent in the format. It's not This American Life.
Right.
Argue.
Well,
Yeah, I'd like to, while I did apologize, I'd like to say that I'm going to stop doing it, and I would listen to the show and really take heed to how it sounds. That's probably not going to happen.
So that was an insincere apology.
No, it was sincere, but I don't see it stopping. It's sort of out of my control at this point.
there's not going to be a change of action at this point.
No.
All right. Well, moving on. Thanks for that, Brian. This comes from Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn took time from his busy legal schedule to write us. What was this the last show? BS? Question mark. You guys can't be serious, right?
No. Let's get this right. He said, "Was this last show BS?"
Yes. Was this last show BS? You guys can't be serious, right? Now I don't know if
We're serious.
I don't know if that means, was it BS we were talking about the last show, or was he like, this show is so bad? What do you think he's
It's
getting
the
at
latter.
there? Anyway, we'll have to clean it up. Sorry about that, Mike. All right, here's one for Lewis. This is kind of directed towards Mr. Geltman. This is from Kirk Edelman. Kirk Edelman lives over in Knoxville, Tennessee.
He's also a published writer.
Yes.
He's written those 2 guidebooks on Appalachian.
Before we go any further with this email, I just want everyone listening to note that the address on this email is Knoxville, Tennessee. But proceed.
Yes, this is written by the guy who actually wrote the guidebook. So
For the Southeast.
I've got a message. I've got a message for Mr. Weld.
You should call it the shithole Southeast while you're at it.
I've got a message for Mr. Weld. First of all, he shouldn't listen to Lewis about Middle Kings. And I do think that Mr. Geltman's opinion of the Kings seriously stains any credibility he has on other topics of discussion on the Hammer Factor. His explanation of the facts surrounding the fragmentation of our national monuments was so spot on, but his confusion about the quality of the Middle Kings is puzzling indeed. So, Weld, we are going to the Kings this summer, and you are welcome to join us. It's a manky, low-quality run, but consider yourself invited.
Right.
Secondly, I've been hearing about a kids' camp that John's been involved in the Yacht area and would love to know more about it. Can Weld explain how we can get our kids involved? My son is totally lower Yacht ready, and I'd love to get him hooked up with the program up there. Kind of a 2-part question here. Let's go with Lewis first. You know what, Lewis, you don't need to say anything. John and I can discuss this.
Thank you.
You haven't been to the Middle Kings, but I'm going to say that is kind of like there is more granite slides that drop more vertical feet on the Middle Fork of the Kings than there are in the entire section of the Little White River.
I don't care about slides. I like paddling when I can get my whole blade in the water. I like the rocks to be I don't know. Look, man, all I can tell you is I went and ran it once, and it was too fucking low, and that was the problem. But I did not come away from that being like, that was a classic run, and I got to go back. I was like, that kind of sucked. And it was just too low. That must be the genesis of my opinion, because I know so many boaters whose opinions on Whitewater I respect who really like that run a lot. But when I went, I thought it was not that great. So I'll go back and give it another shake with proper flow. But all I can tell you is what I saw, and I wasn't that into it.
Well, a little bit of credibility lost, but you know what? Over time, we can rebuild that. Let's move on to
I mean, Kirk makes some pretty quality points here about Lewis's credibility, and I don't know that it can come back at this point. But
it's something that we need to watch.
I just think that the
Yeah.
point of note is that southeastern paddlers love the Middle Kings. But
you think there's a correlation there?
Where there's water, if you come from an area where you're accustomed to having proper flow in the river and, push, nice deep water, loses a little bit of its luster.
This is the most retarded narrative in all of Whitewater that I'm hearing. Like this narrative,
Mhm.
this like. Anyway, we'll get back to that. We got to stick on point here.
Mm-hmm.
Kids kayaking. I'm a little disgusted at this point. Go ahead, Weld. Kids kayaking. They go to the
right.
dock. They slide down rocks. Blah blah blah.
That's right.
Listen,
We
have you ever
we have a very
paddled?
poor quality Manky run up here called the Lower Yacht, which is
exactly.
if you have nothing else to learn how, nowhere else to go to learn how to kayak, it will do in a pinch. I mean, it's not Outlet Falls or whatever we're doing out west.
Exactly. If the whole rest of the country is completely dry, you can try the Lower Yacht.
Listen, you guys.
I know we'd like to learn
once
them at
you guys,
Lockdown.
Someday,
once you guys come out and get out of your Whitewater huts, there's no going back to the shithole that you came from.
Kirk, you can send your kids with Lewis, and they'll go right to the Stikine for the first few days on the river. But all right, what I really want to get together, to make a long story short, is an IR kids development team where we have a couple camps over the course of the summer. Kids can come up, but that's the long short of it. So, and I think there'd be some whitewater aspects to it, and I think Kara would love to have some racing slalom aspects to it as well. But more to come on that.
But more specifically, where can Kirk find more information about this? Like, where does our listener figure out what's going on with your kids' camp? Because it is really cool. I made a little video on it a couple years back, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it started with the Hillikies coming out, Tommy's kids coming out and paddling with us, and then we added a couple kids this year. An old friend of mine, Forrest Noble, sent his kid out, and it started from there. And I just feel like IR has, could really contribute to this. So I don't know. Where can you find out? I think, our website, our usual social media, certainly our Facebook page will have information on it. But that's our goal is to get a van, get some boats, and have these summer camps, basically.
Is this an IR?
It's going to be an IR thing. I mean, Karen and I have been just doing this with our friends, but I'm starting to see real value. I mean, obviously from a marketing standpoint, I mean, having a group of kids out kayaking and involved, and from a marketing standpoint, it's great. But also, it just strikes me as the right thing to do,
Okay. Very cool.
Anyway, yep.
There you go, Kirk. Follow IR on the interwebs and show him that little video. Send him that little I'll send him that video from a while back. You can see what it's all about.
Yeah. Thanks, Kirk.
All right, so we got it through the hater mail. This one comes from Jared Bean. Love the podcast. I much enjoy the personalities, information, and opinions. Thank you for taking the time to put it on. Please continue in 2018. Thank you, Jared. Owen Callahan writes in, I'd listen to you guys reading old copies of AW that you pick up off the bathroom floor.
And I actually have an old copy of AW here.
Can we get a few verses?
Well, it's old. It is old. I can date this a little bit. For one thing, they have Upper Yacht race results here, and I see it looks like I was 5th this year.
Nice.
Which is not my best finish, that's for sure. But here, well, between the ads for War Bonds and Victory Gardens, it looks like there's a full-page ad for Chesterfield cigarettes, the paddler's choice. Yeah. Boy, the boats here are very long. Let's put it that way. Salamander paddle bags. An ad for Mountain Surf. Wow.
Do you have a date on the front of
Lightning
that?
paddles? Remember Lightning paddles? Are they still around? Wave Sport as a separate company?
Wasn't Lee Bong Figlio a part of that?
That's right.
At one time? Yeah.
That's right. It's yeah.
Well, moving on, and this is something that
here we are reading Mohawk canoes. Here we are reading American Whitewater from 1946.
Is there anything in there about paddle offset?
The paddles are longer. There's no question about that. As are the boats.
These may actually be worth discussing. All right, Todd Boiter writes in, on the last show, Grace and Well disagreed on the ideas of a single rotor molding company molding different brands of kayaks and being profitable. Yeah. I agree with you, Grace, as I own a custom injection molding company in North Carolina that molds for numerous different companies, including all the major kayak brands. I'm right. You're wrong. I think we can probably move on.
And this is a point that we need to take up again. He's talking about making components for kayaking companies, not the actual boat. I think the finances fall apart when you get to the actual boat.
Well, this is hard evidence that you don't have to make your own stuff, that you can have someone else make it and sell it.
We don't know anything about this guy and his business. You could be flat broke or trustafarian like everyone else down in North Carolina.
Oh my God. This comes in as from, I'm right on that, and time in the future will prove me correct. So
I don't know.
I'm not really worried about that one.
I don't know how, with zero experience running any kind of business, you would be able to say that.
What on earth are you even talking about, Weld? You just said you've never had a job. Like, basically, your opinion means nothing. Your scope of experience in the real world is nil. It doesn't even exist.
Touche, Mr. Grace.
Adam Crawford throws a soft pitch to Geltman.
Yes.
Adam Crawford, good buddy of mine, puts on a great race on the Embudo River. You guys ever ran the Embudo?
No.
Too manky.
I never have.
Lewis.
I always wanted to go. I heard it was really good.
Don't go, Lewis. It's too manky. If you
Listen,
think
dude. I'm prepared to give Middle Kings another shake. All I can tell you is what I know.
Adam says, what is the general consensus on modern day kayak outfitting? I like this one. I tend to take all of it out and then make my own, shaping up foam hip pads and just thin foam pad on the seat. Maybe a pleasure pod. I could just be reliving the old days when that was the norm, but I really don't like most manufacturers' outfitting. Dagger is about the only one that I'll keep in a boat. How about everyone else? Just throw this one to Lewis.
I'm like 100% on the same page. I rip all of it out. I think the only boat I have that has its original outfitting in it is my green boat, but it's only because that stupid ratcheting seat in the front makes it really hard to rip everything out and outfit it myself, which is what I really want to do. And I really want to find somebody with like the old green boat and trade out the new style seat for the old style seat and then outfit it myself. It's like anything other than foam is just adding weight and complexity to something that you can do a lot better yourself with, a piece of, some mini cell and some dragon skin and some
so to get this
45 minutes of your time.
To understand what you're saying, you take out the plastics, everything, a plastic seat, the seat towel.
No. I leave the seat for sure. I just mean I don't want the carpeting that's in those Liquid Logic boats. I don't want I want the minimum.
Back band.
I leave the back band, but I'm always trying. I strip off all the extraneous stuff and just to recover it with mini cell.
How about knee pads?
Try and pull it down to the bottom of the boat. Knee pads just with the original. So I'm not really doing anything other than padding out the seat in a normal way. But
what about you, John?
Me, I'm terrible with this. I will literally sit. I will get the boat. And in many cases, I won't even adjust the foot braces. I'll just sit in it and paddle.
That's the Valley Mill way. I got corrupted by stolen racing.
Yeah, that is the Valley Mill way. And I've always been like that. I could care less.
I feel
although I have to say, in the past few years, I've gone as far as to put hip pads in. They'll come with the little shims you can put in there. I've been known to put shims in boats recently.
I feel like anything other than having outfitted the boat that myself in the way that I want, it's like going skiing with ski boots that are 4 sizes too big. It's it feels awful and I hate it.
I love the passion. If you could see Lewis's face when he talks about this, it's great.
I do. I think, from a business standpoint, I think that there is an opportunity here to do something else, because that is a complaint I hear all the time, for sure, from customers.
That it's too complex and just too heavy, and
it's just never right.
The thing about it is
no one's ever happy with their outfitting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And especially if you're Kara size, it's completely unacceptable.
The thing about the outfitting now is if you want to borrow a boat, or if you're a kayak school, it's way, way, way better than 20 years ago. But if it's if you own the boat and you take the time to outfit it yourself, I'd rather have it the old way. But if you're just borrowing a boat, the new outfitting is way, way better. You can make it paddleable in 3 minutes.
That's a really good point.
To get it the way you want, you're just ripping all the stuff out and putting it all back in.
That's a really good point. Final listener email of the show today. This comes from Lee Doherty, coming in from Ireland. Love the show, guys. Wondering, have yuns the balls to discuss why there are no black professional kayakers sponsored by any of the major kayak brands? Love listening here from Ireland. Some European segments to the rest of the world would be great to add to. Who wants to take this one?
I'll take the crack at the first part.
All right.
Well, it's simple. The major kayak brands are all racist.
Okay, moving on.
I don't think there's anything else to that.
Well, I will say we had a couple black green racers this year, so I don't know if they're exactly professional, but that's something to say. I think all outdoor sports, just more like it's a culture thing. I don't think it's anything past that,
It's a problem. It's like, like the United States is going to be, what do they say, like majority minority in like very, very soon. And if there's this massive segment of the population that feels like, getting rad on public lands is not something that is not a culture that they're welcome in. It's like, that's a problem, It's like we need to have, we need to be welcoming to everybody. And we also need all those people to feel invested in protected public lands, right? It's like if you have no connection to national forests and rivers, you're not going to be an advocate for those places. So
never mind that. I needed to buy dry suits.
Yeah, seriously.
But that's a good point, Lewis. It's like, how do you get that urban culture to experience what's outside of the city limits? That's a really good point.
And there's some good organizations out there that are focused on, helping, people in minority communities or communities that are sort of historically less involved in these sports or these activities, get involved. Like, I don't know, Outdoor Afro is a cool organization, and Green Latinos. There's a group called Echo, which is like Hispanics enjoying camping and hunting outdoors, I think. But there's a handful of organizations that are, focused on kind of increasing participation in, outdoor activities, and I think that's good. It's important.
Do you know if these are relatively new organizations or they've been around for a while?
I think they're relatively new.
I'll find those and put them in the show notes. That's really cool. Part 2, and listen, viewers, there's not going to be many topics that we don't have the balls to cover here on the Hammer Factor.
I mean, we blew the lid off of the paddle offset topic. There was no one out there willing to touch that until we came along.
You're like the H.L. Mencken of paddle offset.
Right.
Second part of this question, get some European segments. We were just talking about that before we started recording. Absolutely. That's going to happen.
Yes. We need a European correspondent. If any of the European listeners out there would like to become the Hammer Factor European correspondent, let us know.
If you want to get text messages from John Grace at like 3 a.m, being like, we're recording in 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. You have to be ready anytime. Yeah. A friend of mine who's not a paddler, I've known for a while. In fact, I've known my life. He wrote in, for some reason he listens to the show, I'm not sure why, but he thinks that Hammer Factor Nation is too wordy. He thinks we should be calling our listeners out there hammerheads. I just thought I'd throw that out there. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, should we get our celebrity guest on here, our special guest?
Who is this guest?
So this is Dr. Philip Prince. Phil is a avid whitewater enthusiast of the canoe variety. He is a doctor, and his specialty is geology. And he is here to discuss the rocks under the water and why it's so manky here in the southeast.
Right.
Welcome to the show, Phil Prince. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, John Grace. Thank you.
All right. So did you hear my intro of you? Whitewater enthusiast of the canoe variety, doctor of geology. Ooh. Is there anything that I missed?
No, you are well versed in flattery. That was very nice. That was more than I could expect. I heard some about Manky Southeast too. That was where I joined in. So
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a theme of the show. Essentially,
Okay.
Lewis is don't go to the Southeast ever because it's manky, and people in the Southeast love the Middle Kings because it is manky as well. So that's kind of where we're at.
Actually, in all seriousness, can I ask a simple question?
you can ask a simple question.
I need to
Why?
respond to what Gray said before we go too much further here. But
Okay.
Why do rivers in Colorado suck so bad?
That's a
Wait,
great
before we get-
question. They
before
are
we get-
manky.
I don't think the Southeast is even that manky. It's like I think the Southeast, the rivers are actually pretty nicely sculpted to handle an extremely small amount of water. It's the problem.
And I have a second part to that question.
You know, like
I don't
lower
blow
little
past
like,
you here. The second part of the question is, why does everyone who not kayak, when they hear that I kayak, ask if I kayak in Colorado?
Ooh. Oh man, that must be
I'll
the.
go ahead and stand back and let you answer that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So the point about the Southeast rivers being able to handle a small amount of water, that's a good point. That's actually something that I would have brought up to address the contrast between the Southeast and what you would see out west. What you see in a river in terms of like what it looks like, what its stream bed looks like, how steep it is, whatever, is in some way always an expression of like the geologic history of the area. And on the one hand, it's the geologic history of what kind of rock is there, but on the other hand, it's the process history, which is something that operates over much shorter scales. The thing about the Southeast is you see it today. It's the temperate climate. The summer's hot. The winter's kind of cold. It rains a lot in the winter, whatever. That climatic pattern hadn't always been here. If you went back maybe several tens of thousands of years, longer than that, really any time between about 2.5 million years ago and the present, Southeast would look really different. The summit of Mount Mitchell would have been this completely barren rock pile. What you see on the Blue Ridge in North Carolina would have been, in terms of what it looked like with vegetation, nobody really knows. I mean, it looked like northern Canada or something like that. And the point is that the stream channels as you see them today are used to carrying different amounts of water delivered in a different way than they carry now. And they're also used to receiving a lot more stuff falling in from the riverbanks and the cliff sides than they receive today. All these boulders you see in the green, house-sized boulders that are never going to move, they've actually been there long enough that they're starting to get rounded by the water. Those aren't actively falling in anymore, and there was a time in which they were falling in. So the point is, the way a southeastern river channel is shaped today is related to a different period in Earth's climate history than we're actually living in now. So that's why even when a southeast river is really going nuts, I mean, you got a huge flow in it, you might have bank full with respect to vegetation, but it's not like filling out the whole gorge, So it makes really manageable whitewater where you can still have a lot of gradient, but it's not a completely sort of committing, inescapable experience. So it's a really cool example of seeing rivers as, an agent that like shapes the landscape, but the way rivers look means something. I mean, the way a river looks in the Pacific Northwest says something about geologic process and climate there, and it's something really different, of course, than what you see in the Southeast.
What about Colorado? Why can't
What about?
is it just because there's a road and a railroad track on every river out there, or like why are they so manky?
Is it the people that make the river so bad? What is?
come on, guys, there's like 3 good rivers.
Maybe it's the people, and it's the outdoor sports lifestyle culture, man. I don't know. It's a pleasant place to hang out. I mean, you get credibility. You show up with some gear on. You show up with gear. You've got instant cred. You can get kombucha in the bar or whatever. I don't know. Colorado is. It's geologically different in terms of the processes that have been shaping it and how recently they've been shaping it. It's different from the Southeast. It's different from the Pacific Northwest, and the climatic history is different as well. I mean, so there are just different inputs that go into making that landscape and the rivers that shape it look like they do. something like Ewell Creek in Colorado. That's the one that has the real kind of like angular slaty rock. It's got these huge kind of.
That's every river.
Well, okay, so there you go. Those are like in the southeast. I mean, you're not going to get gradient like that on rock like that. It ain't going to happen.
Why is that? I mean, why does Colorado have that? In all seriousness,
Colorado has that because the Rockies are first of all, a younger mountain range than the Appalachians, and what that means is that the Earth's crust there has had energy put into it through plate collision, and that energy is stored as potential energy in big mountains and the thick crust underneath them that holds those mountains up. Okay, when you paddle Whitewater, you're paddling stream energy, you're paddling stream power. The more energy you've got in the landscape and the crust at a given point, the more energy that the rivers are going to be sort of bleeding off as they flow off of that landscape. So Colorado is just a more energized landscape. In addition to being a younger mountain range, there's also very, very high flow of heat into the Earth's crust in the western U.S., kind of like you got in East Africa. You know, the headwaters of the Nile, there's rowdy stuff there. There's a lot of energy going into the Earth's crust there in the form of heat that's rising up underneath the crust and making it kind of swell. So Colorado has essentially a double input of energy, and for that reason, there's so much energy going into the landscape that even soft, crappy rock can still support a steep stream, right? In the southeastern U.S., there's not that much of an energy input, and soft rock like that would get worn down smooth. It wouldn't be able to support any gradient. So,
because the thing I always hear is like rivers in Colorado just have been blasted because there's railroads and roads next to them. But that's true with almost every river everywhere. It seems like that doesn't seem.
No, it is, and that doesn't define. I mean, that doesn't define Colorado Whitewater. That's not why those streams look like they do. Yeah, that might neck them down in places, or add a bunch of really sharp, jangly rock or whatever. I mean, it might channelize them and ramp them up locally, but it's not defining what they look like. And yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, most of the river gorges in the southeast have at some point had blasting or engineering in some parts of them. There's of course exceptions to that, but there are always going to be avenues from low point to high point that people are going to use. The reason the Rockies in Colorado specifically looks like it does is what I told you. I mean, there's energy being injected into that landscape, and on top of that, because of its latitude, because of where it is in North America, how far north it is, so much of it was recently glaciated, was covered in ice sheets, that provides kind of an additional like input and disruption to river systems. So at the end of the day, there's just a lot more that has happened in Colorado to make that a rugged, dynamic landscape, and we don't have it on the East Coast. There's nowhere that has anything like that here, and for that reason, the rivers look really different.
So compare that to like the high Sierras.
You're looking at a fairly similar scenario in terms of the energy input idea and the glaciation. The high Sierras are going to give you a pretty different rock type, or a pretty different suite of rock types. There's going to be a lot of what's going to get called granite out there. Some of it is true granite and this is, y'all don't even want to get into this. This is like minutia, classic definition-based geology, but like true granite versus granodiorite. Out there in the Sierras, it's probably granodiorite. As far as you're concerned, it's granite, right? It's hard, igneous rock. It falls apart in a certain way. It doesn't look anything like that stuff in Ewell Creek, right? And it gives a different paddling experience. And that's just because the Sierras are on a different part of the North American continent, and the rock forming history that shaped them is pretty different from the rock forming and sort of rock stacking and deforming history that shaped Colorado. Now, again, you got good gradient there because of tectonic energy being put in the landscape and the glaciation as well. But
why?
Yeah,
could you
ahead,
say why, compared to some of the other, what we would think of as classics in California. The Middle Kings is so manky and.
Well, now here I'll get creative because I hadn't been out there. I mean, I can't draw the comparison, but it would depend on. See, he's mad now, and I don't even understand why. When you had Colorado going, I could be judgmental, and everybody understood. Here I'm the fish out of water. But no, so much of what you see in terms of like manky, in terms of just a big pile of rock in the stream bed, that just depends on how the rock falls apart, how long the gorge has existed, how long these big steep walls have been present to start falling apart, whether the river can carry all of the material that falls into it out of the gorge. I mean, there's some rivers in really dynamic, active places like the Himalayas or the Andes. They couldn't hold a lot of boulder material. It would all be carried away by the power of the stream. So having not been there and not being able to give you like a first-hand account, it is probably a combination of the specifics of the rock. If the rock has been sort of like damaged and broken up, a lot of the stuff in the Sierra batholiths that, like the stuff around Yosemite or something, where that's igneous rock that cooled in the crust. It doesn't really have like a line preferred orientations that are going to make it fall apart maybe in smaller chunks or fall apart more easily. You could have contrasts like that, but it's going to be place to place to a certain extent. There's a lot of subtle characteristics, and just if he doesn't like that, if Grace doesn't like that, just let him get mad about it. I mean, you can have your opinion. That's fine.
It's not Manky. It's not Manky, Phil. So that was a setup question.
Well, I'll take your word for it. But in terms of Mank, this is an East Coast example, but like Bottom Creek versus the Green, right? Those are two little steep creeks. They're small. They're stream capture streams, so they sort of have the same Whitewater style, but Bottom Creek is on rock that it looks like the Green. Like if you looked at a piece of it, it wouldn't look that much different, but it's sharp and jagged. It breaks apart in a very different way. It shreds boats. Someone always breaks a boat on Bottom Creek, and it's just subtle differences literally in the way the rock falls apart. And they're pretty close to each other in the Appalachians. I mean, this when you're looking to explain that, you have to look at the physical materials that are there.
Real quick, let me move on here. You've talked about stream capture a bunch with me.
Yes.
And it's a big driver of Whitewater, especially, forgive me if I'm wrong, in like older mountain chains and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Real quick, give our listeners, what is stream capture? Use the Green as an example.
I'll use the Green as an example. Okay. Let me preface by saying this is tough to do without pictures while I'm talking about it. I'll do my best, okay? River basins over time, they don't stay the same. It's possible for one river system to quite literally sort of erode its way into its neighbor and start diverting water out of streams in this neighboring basin into this sort of attacking river system, okay, the capturing basin. So the way landscape evolution works is water runs downhill. Water follows the influence of gravity and goes downhill, okay? At points during the evolution of a landscape, some river systems will end up following a path to the ocean that's not very efficient. For example, if you jumped in the French Broad around Hendersonville, you're going to get to the ocean in New Orleans, Louisiana. Okay. That's kind of a weird thought, the planet. And how structure works, right? So the Broad River that flows across the Piedmont of North and South Carolina into the Atlantic has a really nice, easy path to the ocean. Stuff that's up on top of the Blue Ridge around Hendersonville has to go a really crazy long way to get there, and it's about 1,000 feet higher than the Piedmont below it. So those low streams down on the Piedmont quite literally sort of eat their way into the Blue Ridge, and if they eat their way far enough in there, they can literally capture and divert elevated rivers that take that long way to the ocean and direct them down off of the plateau to the Piedmont on a faster path out. I mean, it's no different than you want to drain this area and it's got water on it. You go to the edge of this area and like dig a trench in it with a mattock or whatever, and the water runs off. That's essentially how stream capture works. It's water finding the best way downhill. That's the best way to think about it.
Do you know that story about that recent really dramatic change that happened where that river got shifted into the Alsac?
Yeah, that was is that the glacially related one?
Yes.
Where it was like melting ice or something like that? Is that
something like that?
Yeah, so that's an example of it. In that case, ice is making that happen, but in reality, like, that's why Canada has a lot of really good whitewater. The river system layout that you see in Canada today is trying to get itself reorganized after ice sheets retreated away. Like, during the ice ages, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of years ago and beyond, all of Canada was covered in ice. When that ice melts away, it's carved up the landscape. The way the rivers used to flow doesn't work anymore, so they have to get themselves sorted back out, and there's going to be a lot of rapid erosion to make that happen. The stuff you see on the shorter term, these smaller examples, related to like a glacier melting or something like that, it's the same idea. I mean, the water now has a better way to go downhill. It's just happening on a shorter term for sort of, I guess, what I call an obvious reason. The Mississippi River is the same way. Like, the Mississippi does not want to go to New Orleans anymore. It wants to go down the Atchafalaya River and enter the Gulf to the west of where it does. The Army Corps of Engineers prevents that from happening with this big control structure and whatever. But it's just a fact of the Earth's surface evolving, that what's always the best path for water to go downhill isn't always going to be the best path. And rivers will naturally sort of change themselves up and organize to make that go better.
I guess that was one of the other questions. I think it seems like you're getting there, but I was curious why it seems like we have so few big water classics like in the lower 48, and especially, I mean, there's none really in the east compared to like BC or Patagonia or somewhere like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's all going to come back. It's all going to come back to the energy inputs thing. For a large volume river to sustain a good bit of gradient, it's going to have to be having that potential energy injected back into it all the time. There's going to need to be uplift of the land surface, or it's going to need to be adjusting itself to some great change in its course that recently happened or something. I mean, in the southeast, a river, like a big river, like I don't know, maybe the Broad River in North Carolina or into South Carolina. Those are good sized streams, but they tend to be pretty shallow and they're low gradient and they have these little shoals in them and stuff like that. That's because there's just not enough energy going into to keep them steep. If you went to a place like British Columbia or like Patagonia, again, in both of those locations, there's actual uplift of rock. I mean, those are active collision zones where tectonic plates are colliding, and that energy is going into uplifting the land surface, and the water is sort of always being given a steep course to follow. It doesn't matter if the river's big or not. On top of that, Patagonia, it's in the south, but it's at high latitude. It's in a place that would have been covered in ice, just like British Columbia would have been covered in ice. So you have this like double whammy of rivers that probably are trying to sort their courses back out. The Stikeen's a good example of that. You can tell pretty clearly that it is adjusting itself to a new course now that the land surface isn't covered with ice anymore, and it's got tectonic uplift underneath it. So it's possible to sustain gradient in a high volume river. Like the Sangpo is probably the best example of that. I mean, it's like absolutely huge river that's incredibly massively steep. It has vertical waterfalls and stuff like that in it, and it probably has a discharge volume like the upper Ohio River or something like that. I mean, it's a feature of an actively growing mountain range that can exist only in a setting like that for reasons of physics, basically. I mean, there ain't anything you can do in the Southeast to make high volume whitewater. You know, like they've done in Columbus. I mean, they've kind of necked the Chattahoochee down there, and you get like one rapid that has high volume and some features in it, but it just doesn't exist. It can't happen. So when you've
never been to ASCII.
I haven't, but I was always more of a Charlotte Whitewater man. But John Grace made fun of me for going there and told me I was never allowed to go again. I was very impressionable at the time, and I believed him. So, but you know, one thing you see in features like that, you always wonder, like, why can't they make like a waterfall in a whitewater course? It would probably beat the hell out of the concrete, honestly. Concrete engineers, was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well,
I don't want to talk over you, as I've been criticized of doing.
Water is pretty strong. It eats up rock pretty efficiently, and trying to, you know, engineer a feature that's going to withstand the stresses that bedrock would withstand and not get eaten up and broken apart like bedrock would in a natural setting is pretty tough, right? So
you're talking about this energy input, like let's use the Sakine as an example, without the energy of pushing the mountains up.
Yep. Would
the Sakine just turn to flat water for a short period of time?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, the rock in it, you know, again, having not been there, I looked at a lot of pictures of it to try to study up for this and sound like I knew what was going on. The appearance of the stream banks in pictures, and what little bit I can end up reading about online, just in terms of what types of rock are there. It's not particularly hard stuff. It's not rock that's going to sustain these vertical cliff walls and channel steepness over time, again, without that constant input. So yeah, I mean, it would turn into a river with a gradient more appropriate for that rock and for the volume of water than it carries.
So basically the mountains are growing as fast as that thing can erode.
In that case, it would be interesting to know how fast the mountains are growing relative to how much of that has to do with its course being rearranged by glaciation. But yeah, I mean, it's changing its stream bed really fast. Like if you could look at the Stikine 2,000 years ago, I bet you would see features in it that look pretty different than they do today, and that is zero time from an Earth process standpoint. Likewise, if we could look at it 10,000 years from now, assuming there isn't another glaciation or something, it's going to look really, 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 really different than it does today.
You could already see that looking at the pictures from like the early pioneers of the Stikine. You know, there's tons of rapids there that look way different than they do now.
Just over my experience from the first time to the last time, there was a huge difference.
Yeah. So that's what you're going to see in giant volume and really soft rock. It is a very temporary feature in the landscape, and it's actually showing you what whitewater represents. Whitewater represents rivers that are trying to change the landscape they flow over to be in better adjustment with the path to the ocean or what everything else around it looks like or whatever. I mean, that, like, whitewater is by definition change. And when you can actually see that happen there, that's pretty cool that it goes that fast.
If you went back in time like 200 years and ran the green, would it be recognizable as it is today?
Oh yeah. Unless, you know, that's a good question. I've often wondered about that. I would say so. The differences might be maybe there were, you know, smaller rocks like stuffed into some void or sieve and direct some flow elsewhere with a go left log. I don't know. I mean, how long has that thing been in there? Stuff like that. But no, it would absolutely be quite recognizable. And I think in the lower 48, specifically in the southeast, I think the only places you could go where something would look like really different would be in the Appalachian Plateau. It would be in West Virginia. And things you've seen like the the stream that flows into the New River where the Dries play wave is Laurel Creek or something like that. It had noticeable changes to its bedrock stream bed in one big thunderstorm and flash flood several years back, right? That's just a product of the rock type. The stuff you see in the southeast, even on the escarpment where we have sort of the steepest, rowdiest, albeit low volume whitewater that we have, I bet those things have looked the same for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and maybe even thousands of years.
Super interesting stuff, Phil. This is really good.
Yeah, seriously.
Before we move into a little bit of canoeing talk, because I want to talk a little bit about canoeing, give us your hot spot. Give us the geological perspective of where you think the undiscovered gems are from your just gut.
Yeah, well, you're gonna have to define gem. That's the problem. You're gonna have to say what you want. I mean, if you want,
define it where you want to go on a paddling trip. You're a class 5 paddler.
So I've warned you about this. I'm going to say is somewhere in the Caribbean has interesting whitewater that hasn't been messed with. The reason I say that is that the islands in the northern Caribbean, so we're called the Greater Antilles, Hispaniola, that has Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, Puerto Rico, southernmost Cuba.
Shitholes, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Actually, I believe only one of those was specifically singled out, but I'm sure that they would all be lumped into. Yes, correct. We now have a new name for that region, so Greater Antilles is no longer in play. Shitholia is what we'll call it now. Shitholia has a very interesting characteristic in that those islands, they are not volcanic. They're related to rock uplift. They're essentially like something like the San Bernardino Mountains in California that just sticks up out of the ocean. So if you were to go up a river in eastern Jamaica and look at the rock in it, it would look like you're in western North Carolina. These beautiful granite gorges. If it's not granite, it's some other very hard metamorphic rock. Just awesome rock. I mean, just beautiful stuff, but it's on this tropical island. You're like 2 or 3 miles from the ocean. You could run these things to the ocean, and they're very small rivers, but because the precipitation over the long term has been so heavy there, they're pretty big channels, and there's active rock uplift. There's active energy input there. So you get they're just really unique looking. I've cruised around, looked at a few of them in Jamaica in particular, but it's a place that has precipitation, so there's the potential for water volume, there's the energy input to give you the steepness, and I mean that gives you gradient and the right amount of water, and the rock quality is good too. So I firmly believe that the Swift River and the Spanish River in Jamaica would be totally awesome to run in their entirety. Run as much of them as you possibly could. And I would not be surprised if, and this is a real gasp moment here, if you could go to the southern peninsula of Haiti, to Makaya National Park in Haiti, and find a cool run or two there as well. And the reason I think they're hidden is they just kind of hide in plain sight. Nobody's ever really messed around there. Of course, if you want some kind of overnighter on the coolest stuff you've ever seen, you're going to have to go to a large area on a large continent that's going to have the energy input. So you've got somewhere like in Central Asia or something like that, west of the Himalayas, where you still have rock uplift and the potential for enough volume. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I mean, it depends on what you want to see, I guess. But to me, and included in the Caribbean, is the Santa Marta Range in northern Colombia. If you look at a map of Colombia, it has this big triangle of mountains. The high peak in that's like 17,000 feet or something ridiculous. I mean, it's a completely outrageously steep block of mountains, and it's very obvious because it has this sort of perfect triangular shape. There's definitely really awesome stuff that comes out of there, and that's not part of the Andes. That's part of the Caribbean system. So I include that in my argument.
There,
So, on the contrary to that, what's the worst quality whitewater in the United States?
where do you
Oh,
not
man.
want to live? I mean, outside of like, the Mississippi Delta for whitewater. Where's the worst,
Oh,
mankiest,
gosh.
jankiest?
Where are the shitholes, if you will?
Well, you can find beauty anywhere. That's you
Oh,
look,
God,
See, he
Jesus
doesn't like
Christ.
that. He wanted a polarizing statement from me. No, I mean, in the Midwest would be an example. I mean, like a lot of a lot of places east of the Rockies, like Kansas. A lot of Kansas is covered in sediment debris that was shed off the eroding Rockies. That's what they pump water out of. You ever hear about the Oglala Aquifer that runs agriculture in Canada, Nebraska, and places like that? That is water that comes out of these thick accumulations of sediment that were eroded off the Rockies. It's not even really sedimentary rock per se. I mean, it's unconsolidated stuff, and it's not going to support gradient. It's sort of impossible to get much in the way of rapids there. The one exception to that is the fact that the whole Mississippi basin, I mean, half of that was covered by an ice sheet pretty recently. So you do get places like, throughout Iowa, the Dakotas, you get these kind of random, completely unexpected waterfalls or big drops in big volume rivers, but that's like the only thing around, So yeah, the Midwest is not the best place to find whitewater.
So, Buena Vista is what you're saying.
What's that?
Just
Yes,
think Buena Vista.
correct. Now,
I just wanted to clear that up.
I'm out of the loop. It takes me a minute to figure out.
It was a bit of a dog whistle there, but I got it.
Yeah. Basically, everything from BV all the way through to the Mississippi. That's just horrible. Horrible.
You're going to have your work cut out for you there.
Yeah,
You're going to have your work cut out for you. Now, that said, like west of the Mississippi, there's water to run in northern Arkansas and even eastern Oklahoma in the Ozarks and Ouachitas there. There's whitewater. It's plateau style sandstone boulders, stuff like that, but it's there. There's not going to be a lot of it, again, because the energy input is just not there in that part of the continent. It's not even there in the sense that we have it on the East Coast. And I'll say that like nobody even really knows exactly what it is on the East Coast that has kind of given a shot in the arm to the landscape and allowed it to produce the whitewater we see. But
Eric Jackson is.
That's possible. That's possible. I think that's. I might write that into a scholarly paper. Actually.
Well, Phil,
I was paddling it. Hold on for a second.
Okay.
I could talk about this for hours. By the way, can we just have this go on for another 2 hours?
I mean,
I was paddling years ago, and I couldn't help but think it reminded me exactly like paddling in West Virginia.
Where is this again, John?
Newfoundland?
Newfoundland. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was like great quality whitewater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, Newfoundland, you're pretty close to the ocean. There's elevated landscape there, so you got gradient. That's just a continuation of the Appalachian, so there's good rock there. And you talk about a place that got messed up by being covered in ice. That certainly falls into that category. So it's got all the ingredients, to have good whitewater, as does all of Canada. Was it like West Virginia bouldery style? Is that what you mean by?
It felt like I was running rivers in West Virginia. I mean, it really did feel very similar.
Yeah, that's the
minus the trailers and the
right.
dogs eating used diapers and whatnot.
Yes, extremely bad water quality, etc. Yeah, so, yeah.
It's like talking to Donald Trump.
Whitewater is. West Virginia wasn't covered in ice sheets, but it is the reason there's so much whitewater in the upper Ohio basin there is that the Ohio River, as you see it today, is like 2 million years old, which ain't very old. The Ohio sheets that covered North America and everything that flows into the Ohio now is taking, in some respect, a different path to the ocean than it used to. So that's why West Virginia is steep, and on top of that, it's got good sandstone to hold it up. What you'd see in Newfoundland, would have a different reason for steepness, but it's very possible for the rock up there to be about the same. And if you were, being in the maritime provinces there, that's a little bit different climatically than what's in the middle of Canada. So that's a reasonable connection to make for sure.
Well, Phil, this has been an incredible interview. Always value bombs. I'm sure all the hammerheads is I'm sure all the hammerheads out there are stoked. We don't have time to get into canoeing, so we're going to have you back on the show. To
Good.
Really get into canoeing.
you bring me back, and I'll prepare my remarks. But it may be no accident that we just talked up all the time here, because you're trying to provoke and inflame, John.
No,
I know it before you started.
Yeah, that's me.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. It's a pretty rugged 1-2 combination you're up against here, Phil. But we'll get that. We'll get you back on the show. Big time appreciation for that. Thanks for the time. You're
Yeah,
thanks.
seriously.
That was great.
Awesome. Thank
That
you.
was really neat.
All right, take it easy, guys.
See you, Phil.
Yeah.
There you have it, Phil Prince.
Wow.
We are. Where are we at
That was great.
here?
That was super interesting.
Yeah, I could listen to that all day.
Yeah,
I had like another 15 questions stacked up.
Yeah, we'll have to bring Phil back on because he's got some really good perspectives, not only on geology and whitewater and whatnot, but he is whitewater canoeing. It's a niche of a niche of a niche, but it is a passionate audience, and it will make for a good show, I promise. Well, we are way over our time limit, guys. I don't know what happened here on episode 2, but we're way over the time limit. Let's get into some rants and raves. Would anybody like to lead us off?
I think it's a rave. I think it's a rave.
Okay, I have a rave as well.
Yeah.
Let's hear yours.
Okay. My rave is about Noria Newman's comment about America catching eddies like an American.
Okay.
And that was like a pea under the mattress. That for months that idea has been rolling around in my head. And you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I have to say she is 100% correct. Now I'm going to lay it out right now for all you intermediate and beginner paddlers out there. Maybe some advanced paddlers ever thought about this before. And here's the story. You ready? And if you've ever taken a kayak class from me, you've heard it before. Right? So you're coming into an eddy. The angle at which you approach the eddy, the more downstream angle you have as you approach the eddy, the wider arc you're going to describe into that eddy. Right? The more perpendicular you are to the eddy line, the tighter the turn you're going to describe on the eddy line. Right?
Okay.
Now, there's a vector involved here. It's not just a boat angle. You have to be propelling yourself forward. But you describe a wider trajectory if you approach the eddy line with more downstream angle. Many boaters I see on the river, whether through poor aim or just miscalculation or not really thinking about it, catch eddies, no matter how big they are, with like a very perpendicular approach angle to the eddy line. As a result, they turn, the back end of their boat sticking out in the current like an open sail. It pivots around very quickly, and they turn right on the eddy line and do a very labored forward stroke right on the eddy line to pull themselves up in the eddy. Whereas someone who's done some slalom work will have a much more relaxed paddle plant behind the rock in the still water because they have a better trajectory going into the still water behind the rock. And the same thing happens on a peel out. More upstream angle you have leaving an eddy, the closer that angle's to approach as a ferry angle, the wider arc you're going to do out in the river, and then the more perpendicular you are to the current as you leave the eddy, the tighter the turn you're going to describe. But those two simple trajectories are lost on many non-technically minded paddlers, and it's worth thinking about. And Lewis, I see you shaking your head, but you have nothing to say about this that could dispel this.
I'm going to...
I just think the last piece to throw into that equation is like the strength of the eddy, right? Like if it's like a really mushy eddy with a weak eddy line, you want to kind of ferry into it. And if it's a super strong eddy, you want to come in real, cross the eddy line, pointed pretty downstream with authority, Well,
there's a lot of variables in there, but that's the general idea. But the thing is a lot of paddlers on the river have one style of eddy turn. It's right on the eddy line every single time. And if ferrying into eddies no matter what they do.
What I took from Noria's comment was that most Americans don't know how to do a draw stroke properly.
Well, the thing is, when you go into an eddy turn, you go into an eddy turn, right? Your paddle plant can take a completely neutral, relaxed paddle plant if it's a big eddy, and it's just really dead water, or you can do 2 modifying strokes going into an eddy. You can widen the arc of your eddy turn by doing a stern draw as you enter the eddy, right? Like if you're doing an S turn out of the eddy, you're doing a stern draw instead of a relaxed paddle plant. If you need to tighten the arc coming into an eddy, you do a Dufek stroke, right? Which is essentially a bow draw.
Yeah. And I'll back your argument up on that without getting into a lot of particulars, that if you do that quick little whip into the eddy, you're going to end up on the eddy line. You're not going to get your boat fully in the eddy, and you're going to be in that weird transition current, which is not where you want to be the harder you get into whitewater. So
that's right. You're going to be drifting over stuff backwards sooner or later.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in. I want to rave about Big Baller Brand.
What?
Have you guys ever heard of Big Baller Brand and LeVar Ball and, his
Are they giving you money?
No.
Is this something money for you?
No.
You just get back to dog poop on the trail.
I have heard of it. I wish that I had never heard of it. And
Hey, just bear with me for just a second, Lewis. I get it.
All
I
right.
get it. I'll convince you.
I know
that
what
the
you're talking about.
I'll convince you that the Middle Kings is not manky, and I will convince you that Big Baller Brand is a good thing. So, have you heard about their JBL, their Junior Basketball League? Okay, so this is what my rave is about. It's really about the JBL, not Big Baller Brand. But Big Baller Brand's putting on the JBL. So basically, let's say you're a high school kid and you are a basketball player and you want to be a professional basketball player. Okay? The course that you do now is you go to college. Even if you're like the man, you're going to go to college for 1 year and then you're going to be a one and done or something, or you're going to scrap it through 3 or 4 years of college, and you're going to make it to the NBA for a few years or whatever. That is essentially the NCAA holding every college basketball or college athlete who's in any of the money-making sports like football or basketball totally by the balls. It's completely a stranglehold on what they can do. So Big Baller Brand introduced this JBL league. So you can go right out of college now. If you're trying to be a pro, okay, you want to be a pro basketball player. And I know there's going to be people who are like, oh, John, you're wrong. You get an education when you go to college and, you do this, blah, blah, blah. But now with the JBL, they have 80 players. They're putting together 10 teams. And you try out for this league, and depending on your skill level, depending on your play time, you can get anywhere from $3,000 to like $10,000 a month right out of high school to be a pro basketball player.
What show is this?
This is the JBL. It's not a show.
Oh. Is this Hammer Factor that we're
Oh
on?
my
Or
God.
is this...
Can you listen? So all I'm saying is they have put this league together to take these athletes and allow them to follow their passion.
How is this less exploitative than the NCAA?
Because they're getting paid. The NCAA is like,
exploitative a word?
We'll get. Well, in the NCAA, they're like, oh, well, you can get an education and, blah, blah, blah. And, you like, dude, I was a Division I athlete. You're putting in 15 hours a week before you even get into traveling for the year. It's the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world that all these athletes are doing.
I'm not defending the NCAA.
This is someone coming in.
This doesn't sound like an improvement.
Disrupting the system. What do you mean?
Maybe it's just I don't know.
I don't have any idea what either of you guys are talking about. I really don't.
Anyway, I'm raving about the JBL, and if I had a dream trust fund, I would create the Hammer Factor Racing League, and I would take these people who got like top 3 finishers at these events that I decided, and I would give them a scholarship to simply be a professional kayaker. Don't have to go out and do your Instagram posts. You don't have to go out and all the other stuff that, XYZ company wants you to do and whatever. You've made it into the Hammer Factor Racing League. You are now a true professional, and you can truly reach your potential. Bam.
Who's paying for this?
Don't worry about it.
John Gray.
Hang on. You broke
LeVar Ball. I'm going to act opposite, and I'm going to pay all of those kids in college tuition to stop taking GoPro videos and posting pictures of themselves on the internet. I'll be the NCAA of Whitewater.
But I mean,
Whitewater.
But I mean, that's what a kid has to do now. If he wants to go to who is Max your marketing guy? Weld?
I don't know.
Whoever your marketing guy is, you know what? They're going to be like, well, I need such
no one
posts
knows.
a week, blah, blah, blah. You're doing this, whatever. It's just so... Anyway, it's a rave and a rant. Big baller league.
Huh.
Lewis, where you at? Come on, you're just
Is
smirking
this-
at me. We fought
Is
all
there
this
people
year about
listening?
Manky Rivers.
I don't even know where to start. I'm gonna rant about my shoulder. I ripped the bicep tendon repair out of my arm like a week ago. So life goes on. I don't have to get it fixed. It's basically like I started off with a tenodesis, and now it's going to be as if I had a tenotomy. But my shoulder hurts. I'm not going to get to go run the shit for like another 2 months. I miss kayaking really badly. It's raining. It poured rain here last night. It's like 50 degrees. I want to go kayaking, man. And it's a bummer. It's going to be okay in the end, but it sucks right now. That's my rant.
That does suck, man. Thinking about that makes me queasy
It's
in my
more-
stomach.
More a tale of woe than a rant, but anyway, that's all I got.
Well, thank you for listening to Hammer Factor Season 2, Episode 1. And I think we did a little better this round than our season ender.
Yeah, that was a real
Philip saved
disappointment.
us.
Yeah, he threw the rope there for sure. He grabbed that bitch, so to speak.
Well, big thanks to Phil Prince. Thank you for listening to the Hammer Factor, and we will see you on the river.